dear TV friend, and welcome to another very, very interesting edition of our weekly and regular program at this time over the Divine Mercy radio television captioned The Debate. Of course, it is a very, very important learning moment where our minds are tickled and our thinking caps are always in position, as much as our debaters always whet our appetite to feed us with topics debatable for learning purposes. That is why I remember last week, Saturday, same time, over the Divine Mercy Radio Television, we were examining and deliberating and debating on the imposition of colonial language on indigenous traditions as a cultural genocide. It was quite an enlightening and enlivened moment with the debaters. Today is another day for another debate. Of course, the atmosphere will be as usual. Appetite will be whet. The brains will be thinking and thinking. Tonight, dear TV friend, we shall be considering another very, very interesting topic. This time around, our caption for tonight's debate is human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. Human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. At our panel here, we have a gentleman and a lady filled with a whole lot of knowledge to bring and to actually call our awareness and consciousness with regard to human freedom and vis-a-vis, of course, God's existence. I will begin by my left, those for the motion. Immediately by my left is Jordan Miliki, always there and always present, seminary and unpastoral here. Good evening to you, Jordan.
Good evening, Father.
And how are you today?
Fine, looking forward to the session.
All right, thank you so much. I can see you are really fine and looking forward to the session. You are already, for the session. And still for the motion is a lady in our midst tonight. And this is wonderful, showing that things are actually evolving. The debate is gaining much momentum. It's in the person of Joyce Lekiaka. Good evening to you, Joyce.
Good evening, Father.
How are you feeling this evening?
I'm very fine, thank you.
I'm sure this is your very first time appearing in this platform.
Yes, Father, exactly.
All right, so it's a pleasure having you for tonight's debate.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you so much. Those were for, and those will be for the motion tonight, Jordan and Joyce. And by my left, regular faces as well. Those who will be arguing against the motion tonight. By my left immediately, we have Bernard Asongne. Good evening to you, Bernard.
Good evening, Padre.
And how are you today?
It's a beautiful evening.
I can see how beautiful it is. Yes. And by his side, those against the motion, in the presence of Bernard, is Franklin Fomukong, seminarian on pastoral year. Good evening to you, Franklin.
Good evening, Father.
And how are you doing tonight?
I'm waxing strong.
Waxing strong. It has been quite a very, very hectic week. Though hectic, I still see you are very, very strong, waxing strong. Yes. Dear TV friend, much ado about nothing. We shall go into the crux of the matter. We shall be actually ushering you into the debate ground where we shall be getting assertions and propositions with regard to tonight's topic. That is, human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. Let us give the floor to the first speaker for the motion. Jordan, over to you.
Thank you, moderator. All protocols duly respected. I am for the motion that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. For us to understand the core of this topic, I would like to define some preliminary terms. 1. Human freedom. It refers to the capacity of individuals to make choices, act upon them, and shape their own lives free from external constraints or determinism. In fact, according to Jean-Paul Sartre, humans must create their own values rather than relying on external authorities or norms. 2. God. He is often understood as a supreme being, creator and sustainer of the universe. He is known to be omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnibenevolent. 3. Existence. According to Sartre, existence is inherently meaningless because all things are and only man is said to exist. Friedrich Nietzsche, existence to him is nihilism, which means it is meaningless. So talking of God's existence is talking of a meaningless sustainer, a supreme being with no meaning. Now, permit me to proceed with my argument. Man is a free being. In fact, man is condemned to be free. For we to ascertain this, we must first of all begin by refuting the existence of God, or better still, refuting the existence of a supreme meaningless being. Permit me to use this paradox of a child, as a philosopher puts it. When a child grows up, he has the father to always look after him. After a period in time, he doesn't see the father again, but he has the image of a father. When things are weighing down on him, he then creates an image of a father who was always there to protect him, of a father who was always there to defend or fight for him, and he calls that image God. That is the God we have come to debate about. An image or an idea that had been created in man's mind, but actually his existence is meaningless, baseless, or nonsensical. In fact, it is just a comforting idea that has held man hostage from exercising his freedom, but refusing to choose is already making a choice not to choose. According to the libertarian philosophy, man is free and has autonomy for actions. Human freedom requires the ability to make choices that are not determined by God or any other external factor. God's existence limits man's freedom. So for man to be free implies there is no God. More to that, just as the affirmation or acceptance of a supreme deity or a God, it limits or restricts freedom. A thing cannot be and not be at the same time. It is either it is hot or it is cold. It cannot be both hot and cold at the same time. In the same way, truth is truth. Half truth or limited truth is no truth at all. There is no in between. It is either true or false. So too, to be free, it means to be free. Half freedom or limited freedom is no freedom at all. So we cannot be talking of freedom, yet we are talking about somebody who imposes his being on man's nature. He imposes his policy or ways on man, and we still talk about man being free. It's either man is actually free, then there is no God, or there is a God and man is not free. But as I had already declared from the beginning, there is no God because his existence is baseless and meaningless. Once man accepts the existence of God, man's freedom is limited. No wonder when Paul was writing, he cried out, I am a prisoner to the Lord. I am in chains. The things I love to do, I can no longer do them. This is a young, refined man who has limited his freedom to the existence of God. That the God that he thinks or holds so dearly to him, he can no longer carry out his duties the way he likes because he believes or he affirms that there is a God that is actually existing. So, man's freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jordan Meliki. That, yes, human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together, arguing on the basis that God's existence limits human freedom and a thing cannot be and be at the same time. And there is nothing like half freedom, nothing like a half-baked man or nothing like a half-baked seminarian, as Jordan asserted, and that there is no God because his existence is limited. Dear TV friend, it is the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau who is held for a coat. Man was born free, but everywhere he goes in chains. Of course, this famous phrase in the opening lines of his work, his influential book, The Social Contract. Let us equally get what those against the motion will have to say for tonight's debate, that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. They are against the motion. The floor is given to Bernard Aksongne, who will be the first speaker against the motion.
Thank you very much, Father, for giving me the opportunity again to make clear some basic concepts with regards to our debate topic for today. Good evening to our very venerable audience of Divine Mercy Radio Television who are following us live on this debate. When man diminishes and has less regard first for his fellow man, then to other things occupied by nature, the certain question that pops up immediately will be to dare to ask the most evident thing before man and before nature: does God exist? And when man's reasoning has completely faded away, has completely failed him due to his wrong application of it, he turns to say with courage that his freedom is and should be all that matters. That is to say, no freedom, therefore God is. And on the other hand, freedom, therefore God is not. Thus, I will be arguing against the motion that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. That is to say, human freedom and God's existence move together and can conveniently move on the same path leading to the same destination. Now, before we ride on, I would like us to make clear the meaning of two things: human freedom and God's existence, which takes central stage in the course of this debate. Human freedom. The word human comes from the root Latin word humanus, derived from homo, meaning man or human being. Freedom, on the other hand, has its own meaning in an Old English word freedom, meaning the power or right of acting without compulsion. Analyzing these two words, human freedom, then would denote that it is an inherent quality tied to our very being as humans. The one connect between humans and freedom implies responsibility. Now, let's look at God's existence. God will simply be defined as guardian, one who is invoked. In an excessive sense, it points to a being who is worshipped or appealed to. Existence derived from the Latin existere, meaning to stand out, to come forth, or to emerge, implies being real, being you. Now, our debate today focuses on whether God's existence revolves around the fact that God can be said to stand out or come forth as a real objective entity with the presence of human freedom. Of course, they move together. We cannot conveniently talk about God and man without visiting the history which is revealed in the Bible, which is God himself. In the book of Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, it says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over every living creature that moves on the ground. That's Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. The phrase, fill the earth and subdue it, depicts human dominion over the earth, and rule over it further emphasizes the authority and responsibility that humans are given over the natural world. Now, the big question we must answer is, why is man free? And does God's existence depend on human freedom? We shall answer this as we proceed. The very first point I would like to stamp on is the whole aspect of divine sovereignty and human agency can coexist. That is to say, compatibilism. That is my word. Human freedom, God's existence can be summarized in one word: compatibilism. The very common approach to compatibilism is that free will and determinism, that is God's plan, determinism, in this determinism I mean God's plan, are not mutually exclusive. We must note firsthand that God can know and ordain all things without negating human freedom. Saint Augustine of Hippo, in his book The Civitas Dei, that is the city of God, where he argues beautifully about predestination and free will, holds that God's foreknowledge doesn't necessitate our actions. We humans freely choose to act. We freely choose to act and to carry out actions in our contemporary society, even though God knows what we will choose. Looking at this, we humans freely choose to act, even though God knows what we will choose. Looking at all of this, we must note that this statement does not follow that though God knows what is to be our will, we do nothing voluntarily, for he knows what our will is to be. In the Summa Theologica, the angelic doctor Thomas Aquinas argues that God is the primary cause of all things that are. God is the primary source of all things that exist. But God is the secondary causes, including human free will, still operate according to their own nature. God gives us the capacity for free will, and we exercise it genuinely. God moves all things according to their condition, so that from necessary causes, the results are contingent effect. Therefore, while God knows contingent things, it does not follow that they exist necessarily. When I mean for something to exist necessarily, I mean that thing does not depend on another thing. But when I mean something is contingent, therefore, that is dependent on another. Man is dependent on God. But man is not a necessary being. God's existence does not necessitate human freedom. Man is free to act in his own way, rightly and focusfully, without God interfering, but man bears responsibility for his action. Thus, to say that the fact that God knows we humans depend on him, it does not follow that we are the cause of our existence. No, man is not the cause of his existence. God is the cause of man's existence. But God is not responsible for the misuse of man's free will. When you hear philosophers like Alvin Plantinga, who have developed more sophisticated versions of compatibilism, he argues that free will is compatible with divine causation. It emphasizes that God gives us the power to make real choices, even if he knows in advance that those choices will be disastrous for us. He does not interfere to stop us from carrying out our actions freely. If man in his right senses chooses to do evil over good, he is bound to face the law, which has its roots in the absolute law, the supreme law, the summum bonum law, which is found and derived only in God alone, the giver of all things. Therefore, human freedom and God's existence can be consistently held together. I rest my case.
Human freedom and God's existence can be consistently held together. That was the first argument against the motion that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. And that was Bernard Asongne against the motion, emphasizing on human freedom and God's existence as absolutely compatible. Dear TV friend, it is becoming very, very interesting, of course, with arguments marshaled on both angles, those for and those against. It is a pleasure to lead you now, ushering you to the floor. Of course, the second speaker for the motion, the person of Joyce Lekiaka. What have you got for tonight's debate with regard to the caption?
Greetings, dear moderator. Greetings, televiewers. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So I stand for the motion that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. Jean-Paul Sartre was a French philosopher. He emphasized on absolute human freedom and choice, which became a ground for the denial of God's existence. So God created man free and left him in his own inclination. If you say God gave us the commandments, so it's either we follow the commandments or we don't follow it. So it's a choice. We have the freedom to choose either to follow it or not. So divine sovereignty and human freedom requires autonomy and self-determination. If God exists, God's sovereignty will necessarily imply control over human actions. This will render our choices meaningless. So you cannot say God's existence work together with human freedom. For instance, if a person decides to donate charity, if God's sovereignty is absolute, then God would have caused the person to make the decision, undermining the person's free will. I'll move to Augustine. Augustine spoke on freedom and God. He said, if we do not have free choice, we are not to be blamed for whatsoever we do. So imagine I sin or I commit something against my neighbor. I contradict what God has said. God is supposed to be responsible for my actions, not me, if you are saying that God exists. So will you be happy? I want to ask the question that will you be happy against your own will? If you hold that God is the cause of your happiness, then you will be happy unwillingly. What could be more as absurd than that? Nothing. So in Genesis chapter 2 verse 16, God gives Adam and Eve the freedom to choose between obeying and disobeying the commandments. This suggests that human freedom is essential to human experience. I would like to talk on Thomas Aquinas, who said in every choice we make, we are aiming at something that we agree as good, we regard as good. So if God exists, his attributes will necessarily limit human freedom. Conversely, if human freedom exists, God's existence would be compromised. Okay, for example, imagine a person who chooses or who makes a choice that contradicts God's own, like, for example, killing someone. If God's sovereignty is absolute, then God would have caused the person to make that decision, undermining my freedom. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Lekiaka Joyce, marshalling her arguments for the motion that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together, and citing some philosophers, beginning with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and even citing Jean-Paul Sartre, and even to Thomas Aquinas, and even to Augustine. She succeeded to marshal arguments that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together, knowing that God created man and allowed man for himself, and thus underlining and highlighting autonomy and self-determination. citing the fact and reiterating the fact that man is autonomous and self-determined, therefore debunking the existence of a God. Therefore, human freedom, of course, human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together, as Lekiaka Joyce argued. That was the second speaker for the motion. Thank you for the argument. Dmrtv friend, I know, yes, the appetite is wet for the second speaker against the motion. Just as I know your temperature is heightened, you following this debate, have you ever thought of human freedom vis-a-vis God's existence? Have you ever thought of the fact that humans are free to act the way they act, and alongside God exists? Have you ever thought of the existence of God alongside man acting freely? Do these two actually complement each other? Or man is free so God does not exist? Or God exists and so man is not free? That is the caption of our debate. Those are the angles which we are trying to exploit tonight. And therefore we shall take the second speaker against the motion, that is in the person of Franklin Fomukong. The floor is yours, Franklin.
Thank you very much, Father, for giving me the opportunity to say a word or two on such a sensitive topic, human freedom and the existence of God. And I begin asking the question, does my belief in God as a Christian hinder in any way my freedom? I will of course start with the philosopher of freedom, as all the others have quoted him so much, Saint Augustine. Precisely one of his books, De Libero Arbitrio Voluntatis, that is on free will and free choice. Saint Augustine tells us that human freedom and the existence of God are not contradictory propositions, but they are cooperate propositions. That is, they move hand in hand. When man's freedom, man ultimately gets his freedom from God, and as such, this freedom which he gets from God cannot serve as a proof to debunk the existence of God. The question which I want to ask all of us this evening is, what kind of freedom is proper for man as man? There are two kinds of freedom. There is the freedom for, and there is the freedom from. Freedom for, that is the freedom to choose the good. Freedom for the good. And the freedom from. Man in recent times loves freedom from. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. He never wants to use his freedom to do something. He always wants to use his freedom to exclude himself. And I tell you, human freedom, when placed side by side with God's existence, propels man into his true nature. In the book of Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, we hear that God created man in his image and likeness. And when we read this particular verse from the New Jerusalem Bible, we follow a footnote which is attached to that particular verse. And in explaining that verse in that footnote, the authors tell us that when we are talking of God's image and likeness, we are talking of two things: freedom and wisdom. God bestowed on man freedom and wisdom because wisdom enhances freedom. That is why also the holy author John in his book, in his gospel, that's the gospel according to John chapter 8 verse 32, tells us, and you shall know knowledge, wisdom, the truth, and this truth which you know shall set you free, telling us that ultimately our freedom comes from God, and our freedom should ultimately lead us back to God. I shall postulate just one argument this evening why I stand for the motion that human freedom and God's existence are cooperate. The argument from analogy. I take human relationships, then analogically speaking, I extend what is expected of human relationships into the relationship man has with God, because I shall not belabor the proofs for God's existence or to prove that man exists or to prove that man is free. Now, if I truly love a friend, I will bestow on that friend love, trust and respect. That the person is my friend, I like that person, I trust that person, and I respect that person. Now, if I truly love somebody, will I not allow that person to be free? To be able to choose whether to love me back or not? Because the scope of human freedom is so vast that man has even the freedom to choose against God, and God still allows it. We see that everywhere in contemporary society, where there are people who call themselves atheists. They say they don't believe in God, but God still allows these people to choose against him. If you have a friend, the question is, won't you allow that friend to make the choice to love you back? Won't you bestow on that friend the gift of freedom? So too, if you can give a friend freedom, then God, who is our friend, who is our brother, also gives us freedom when we engage in that relationship with him. I end by stating or by arguing from the dimension of the consequences of human freedom. You know, there was a certain book written by Patrick Madrid and Kenneth Hensley called The Godless Delusion. It was a reply to Richard Dawkins' own book, The God Delusion. In that book, The Godless Delusion, Patrick Madrid narrates how human freedom has plunged man into what I will call this evening a cataclysmic quagmire. How man has used his freedom. For example, he quoted the case of the United States of America, a country which was built on belief in God. That is, when you hold the dollar bill, that is the currency used in the United States, it is clearly written there, "In God we trust." So he was wondering, how could such a country that was built on the foundation of belief in God has turned into a total mayhem which we can find today? Abortions, contraceptives, transgenderism everywhere. It is because of man's misuse of his freedom. So when man sidelines God and wants to take freedom as the sole order of his life, he plunges himself, as I earlier said, into a cataclysmic quagmire. And I end with the statement: this God, which man in recent times tries to exclude in pursuit for freedom, is instead, dear viewers, a necessary prerequisite for man's freedom. God is a conditio sine qua non for man's freedom. Without God, man is not free. And man's freedom should ultimately lead him to God. Thank you.
God is a conditio sine qua non for man's freedom. Conditio sine qua non, a condition without which a thing cannot be. Therefore, without God, there is no human freedom, as asserted by the debater Franklin Fomukong, and highlighting God's existence and human freedom as corporate propositions with freedom for and freedom against. Freedom for and freedom from. Dear TV friend, it is true. Tonight, you shall know whether human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. We remember, knowledge from the Greek episteme, which means to know, is that philosophical discipline which deals with knowledge. How we come to know. How we come to know that a thing is. How we come to know that human freedom can be compatible with God's existence, and how we come to know that God's existence can kind of limit human freedom. That is our point of inquisition for tonight. And so far so good. The debaters have been up to task, those for and those against the motion. Gentlemen friend, at your television screen is a number projected. You can get to us with your own remarks. You can get to us with your own input. You can get to us with your own, of course, point concerning this debate tonight. And some people are already trying to write us. Some have been trying to call, but we want to say you cannot call us directly here on the red line. You can chip in maybe your own contribution through a text with the number projected at your television screen. And right here, somebody is just giving a comment, a sister indicating, I will give the name later on, who says, I love the topic of the day. How I wish all the parents were following this program. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is a sister writing us. We shall get the name. Is anonymous for now. Dear TV friend, at this point in time, we shall get a short break. After which we shall come and get the wrapped up arguments on both angles, those arguing for and those arguing against. After which we shall get, of course, a short evaluation and the church's stance with regard to the motion tonight. At this point in time, we shall give our debaters to wrap up with their arguments as they prepare to pop up. A short interlude. Welcome back, Dmrtv friend. As a reminder again, just to whet your appetite, Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his social contract, man was born free but everywhere in chains. Tonight we have been considering the debate topic, human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. So far we have had the 4 debaters with different assertions, with different authors, strong and serious authors quoted, and we get situations and propositions of catastrophic quagmires. So lots, coming up with regard to the arguments today. Now, let us take you now to have the final saying, the one who will hit the nail by the head in the person of Jordan Meliki, arguing for the motion that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. After converging the points together with Joyce Lekiaka, Jordan Meliki has this for us for tonight's debate.
Thank you, Father Moderator. I may claim I love my friend, yet I don't want my friend to be like me. I may claim I love one, yet I still restrict a person's freedom. If we should accept actually that there is a God and that man is free, it's just like releasing a dog and yet holding it back by the chain. God has actually given man freedom, but yet restricted the freedom through his rules. So, that is the only option we can accept his existence. If not, I still stand on the fact that he doesn't exist because man is condemned to be free. In his lecture, Existentialism is a Humanism, Sartre argued that human existence is characterized by freedom. He claimed that if God exists, human freedom would be compromised. Jean-Paul Sartre introduces a concept of bad faith. He describes this tendency to deny or to repress human freedom. He calls that tendency bad faith. Believing in a God's existence is a form of bad faith, as it allows individuals to avoid taking responsibility of their choices, since they know there is a God that has limited their freedom, so that God is responsible for everything. I am perplexed when I see refined young men like my opponents taking such stance.
Yes, there you are.
If I follow you, people will be heading towards a shipwreck which I want to avoid and not go to that direction. Human must take full responsibility for their choices and create their own values. Man is condemned to be free. If denying that you are not free is already exercising your freedom. To add, even if God was said to exist, He is distant and uninvolved in human affairs. He is far away, or he is a God that has created the universe as you have put it, not me. He created the universe and he has hidden himself in a far away place. Epicurus holds that we should focus on attaining happiness and avoiding physical pain rather than worrying about the divine. Talking about the existence of God when it comes in terms of human freedom is wasting our time. There are more meaningful things to talk on than to talking about God's existence, because man is already a free being, which already infers that God doesn't exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Jordan Meliki, the final speaker for the motion for tonight's debate that human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. And in order to marshal this argument to all the viewers and audience following us, Jordan did indicate that, of course, placing human existence or human freedom together with God's existence, on both angles, is like claiming to release a dog and holding it back by the chain. And so, human freedom is not compatible with God's existence. Jordan Meliki asserted. Assertion well received. Thank you so much, Jordan. And I can see the final speaker against the motion is equally poised to equally hit the nail finally by the head. Let us get what Bernard Asongne has got for us as a culmination of the asserted arguments posed tonight. Yes.
Gracias, Father. Thank you very, very much. We well know that when contractors engage into building a road, when they pour on the road the first strip of gravel and try to walk on it, but fail to put the tar at the end, that road will not go for at least 6 months. I will not like that for this debate this night. So in that sense, my opponent has been talking so well about being perplexed. But when you talk about being perplexed, I would like to recommend that you take a deep breath. You sit back and get to the book, The Guide of the Perplexed by Moses Ben Maimonides. Then you'll be able to wake up from that slumber which you are at the moment. Now, if you look at the debate very well, we are not here to prove so much the existence of God, because it is already evident from cosmological proofs, from ontological proofs by Anselm of Canterbury, from anthropological proofs. All of these encompasses the proofs of God's existence. Nature is first hand the proof of God's existence. We are here to clarify misconceptions about human freedom that Sartre has successfully convinced the masses to follow him. Of course, I will not like that still for this debate. Now, when we look at the debate very well, I would like to take a beautiful analogy of a gardener and a plant. Let's go practical now. Gardener, a garden, and plants in that garden. When you look at a gardener, a beautiful gardener, a one who devotes time and energy on gardening, you know very well that that gardener has several plants, beautiful flowers of different types that he plants in that garden. Every day he goes to that garden, shapes those flowers, shapes those various plants. He waters them, ensures that they have manure, everything they need to grow. But you will bear with me that in the course of growth, not everyone responds to the watering that the gardener gives to the plants. Not everyone responds positively to the manure that is being placed to the plants to grow. Some, out of sheer bahat and refusal to blossom, refuse to blossom. And from this dimension, I would like to say these are the people who have taken the other bend of freedom, misuse of freedom. But on the other part, there are some who will blossom. grow into a beautiful flower and become very beautiful and attractive for others to pluck. In essence, the gardener here is God himself, whose existence is not questionable. The garden is the earth, which is created by God himself, and the plants in it are human beings. Human beings who some have refused, some have hardened their hearts. Their hearts are made of stones, and others have accepted to follow the way of truth and reality. Now, let me round up. Freedom is necessary for moral responsibility. This is the last point I would like us to take home. Freedom is necessary for moral responsibility. If we humans are not truly free, then we cannot hold moral responsibility, or we cannot be held morally responsible for our actions. For example, the concept of sin, the concept of virtue, the concept of justice, the concept of reward and punishment, all of these, they encompass all what we call freedom. When you talk about sin, you talk about virtue, you talk about justice, you talk about rewards and punishment, it's all enclosed in freedom, human freedom. Immanuel Kant, though not explicitly a theologian or who took a theological bent, but Kant's ethical framework in his critique of practical reason talks so much and talks about the dependence and the assumption of human autonomy. When I talk of human autonomy, I'm talking about human freedom, the free choice to carry out actions. For him, Kant argues that moral duty requires the ability to choose between right and wrong. If we are simply puppets of fate or divine decree, morality collapses into nothingness and emptiness. But we will not like to get into that dimension, and I will not like my opponents to get into that as well. And that is why when you read a lot, Clive Staple Lewis' brilliant considerations of Christianity says, Lewis argues that the very existence of a moral law implies that humans have the freedom to choose to obey or to disobey it. God will not command us to do that. And that is why when he created Adam and Eve made their decisions, made their choices. And the choices are what has kept us into the quagmire situation that we are all in it today. That is why we are suffering from the setbacks of the atrocities. They disobeyed God. They ate the forbidden fruit. I will not like my opponents to eat the forbidden fruit this night. So let's leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard Asonne. That is the final speaker against the motion for tonight's debate, which goes thus: human freedom and God's existence cannot be consistently held together. So far, so good. It has been wonderful, as mentioned by some of our viewers, though they have not given their own stance, they have not given their own positions, but they are just interested in the articulated arguments for tonight's debate. We are so grateful and thank you all the same. Still, we are mentioning Brother Frank Aristotle, though not telling us from where he's writing, but from all indications he's following us and very much learning what is happening this evening and equally reaping the fruits of a wonderful deliberation and argument coming from this evening's program, Debate Over the Divine Mercy Radio Television, sharing the light of hope. So far, so good. It has been wonderful listening to Jordan Meliki and Lekiaka Joyce for the motion, and Bernard Asongne together with Franklin Fomukong against the motion. Dear TV friend, it has been wonderful listening to our debaters. I know you have a position. I know your minds are still thinking. your brains are still ticking, your intelligent quotients heightening, and you are reflecting on what could really be the stance of the church concerning this debate for tonight. I want to think that debate topics like that accompanied with, theological deliberations and topics as well, the church will always have a definitive say, and that is why we shall be getting the stance of the church. But before we get the stance of the church, I want to use this opportunity to congratulate the debaters for tonight based on their arguments. Their arguments are well articulated and their points came across so plain and clearly that we say kudos unto all of them. And I want to say that a debate being what it is, there wasn't any attack on people's personality. I think the attack was, or rather, the emphasis was based on debunking other people's propositions and assertions, which gives a debate a decorum that it actually deserves or merits, which is wonderful. Again, I want to hail the debaters for citing very serious authors. The last author that was just quoted, Immanuel Kant's critique of pure reason, and we have other serious authors quoted like Thomas Aquinas with the Summa Theologiae, and of course with his Quinquevier, the 5 ways proving the existence of God. Not leaving out so many others like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Jean-Paul Sartre, and the others. I want to think that the research was well done, and we encourage the debaters to go for more research and quote again more and serious authors in subsequent debates of this topic. C.S. Lewis equally quoted. That is so wonderful, especially. And of course, the famous Augustine with his De Libero Arbitrio on free will and his Civitate Dei on the heavenly city, and even Civitate Terrena, Civitate Dei, the heavenly and earthly city. Thank you so much, dear debaters. It has been wonderful. On those, I hail you and I give you all. I want to think that at least all on those aspects, 97% for now. Tonight, we are going to declare, of course, the winners of the debate based on the church's stance. Yes, Dmrtv friend, with regard to this, the church, the Catholic Church, has always held, as Holy Mother Church teaches, according to scriptures, according to magisterium and tradition, that God created man and gave man free will. Free will is very, very important. Emphasis on free will, as we heard in the authors quoted, Augustine on the Libero Arbitrio. Now, in this free will, God created humans with a gift of freedom, allowing them to make choices. But God, being God, knows what will become of every human being if he walks in accordance with the will of God and if he goes against the will of God. The church teaches that human freedom is, of course, given to man, but not totally absolute, because man works with his freedom. And so there is no predetermination. There's no predetermination. Humans are not predetermined, even though God knows whatever will happen to each and every one of us, what will happen of us as an individual if you walk according to his will, and what will happen even when you walk against his will. And so, humans have the capacity to choose between good and evil, and this choice has consequences for their relationship with God and with others. And so, to cut a long story short, the church teaches that human freedom and God's existence can be consistently held together. Human freedom and God's existence are complementary. Just as we have complementary base pairing for biological elements, they will say adenine pairs with guanine and cytosine pairs with thymine, something like that, for those who have studied molecular biology. So that is how human freedom is compatible with God's existence. God's existence is compatible with human freedom. On this count, therefore, based on the arguments purported tonight, those for the motion have, on average, 100% have 87.5%, while those against the motion are crowned with 90%, which means those against the motion had the day, while those for the motion of course, did not have it according to the church's teaching. We wish them the best, Jordan, Meliki, and Joyce, hoping that you come powerfully next time and subsequently, still based on the church's stand. Dmrtv friend, want to use this opportunity to hail the efforts of Joyce. Joyce Lekiaka, who happens to be a master's student in the Faculty of Education, Department of Curriculum Studies and Teaching, who decided to answer present here for tonight's debate. We hope that if you are free, you can always contact us, and whenever you are available, you make it present here to nourish others, to enliven their knowledge, and of course to know much about the church's teaching on issues like this. It has been wonderful so far, so good. So once more, thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you for the debate.
Thank you, Father.
Yes, any last word for your viewers?
We should take what the church teaches. They are highly recommended to do so.
Highly recommended to do so. Yes, Joyce.
Same thing with him.
Same thing with him. I hope you answer present when next we solicit for your presence.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And of course, Bernard.
Yes, Father, I just want to say, let God be God
Let
and man
God
be
be
man.
God. Let God be God and man be man.
Yes.
Yes, and Franklin.
I will always keep thanking the debate committee of Dmrtv for choosing these insightful and topical topics to be deliberated on. And it's also open even for viewers. When sending your messages, if you have something which you think could be debated on, you could push them in.
Absolutely.
We'll receive them, diagnose them, and use them.
Yes, thank you so much. That was Franklin Formokong. Like he mentioned, if you have a topic you think that could be so educative to the society, could be of utmost importance to matters of faith and morals, you can chip in your topic, and like he said, we shall diagnose, dissect, and of course, in situ, in place, bring it to your presence. So, Dmrtv friend, at this point in time, we draw the curtains for tonight's debate. It has been wonderful. General supervision came in from the station manager, Joyce Bong herself, and the general production and supervision came in from Joyce Bong, the station manager. The broadcasters for tonight, we had JC Agum behind the 101 button, and of course, kindness and Jokum working in close collaboration, equally pressing the 101 button. For our debaters tonight, we had Jordan, we had Joyce, we had Bernard, and we had Franklin. And for the moderator, I have been Reverend Father Martin Njemoka, urging you to stay tuned to more interesting programs over the Divine Mercy Radio Television. Next week, same time, same TV station, same faithful audience. That is you, a highly esteemed audience, listening to us. It shall be another 10 for another interesting debate. See you, and happy new week that's about to begin. Happy weekend as well. Stay blessed.